Hello, 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 and welcome everybody. This is Dr. Minette Riordan here to talk about ways to get out of a creative drought. And I'm just getting all my technology kind of set up and settled here this morning. So bear with me for just a few minutes as I get everything organized and give everybody a minute to join me here on the call. Hi, so great to see everybody. Thanks for joining. Super excited to talk about the topic of a creative drought today. And it's, hi Patricia, hi Cindy. Great to have everybody joining me live. I'm just working out my tech over here, making sure the video is showing. I got two computers going here for a minute. And I know it always takes a minute for everybody to join. Hi, Amy. Glad you're here. Just dipping in while I wait for your client. So hi, Rachel, all the way from the UK. Thanks for joining me live today. So those of you that are just joining for a few minutes, that's awesome. Not a problem at all. The video will stay in the Facebook group for sure. Hi, Penny. Welcome. And hi Lisa, great to see you here. So I'm trying to see like through my little trifocals here, all the little comments on the bottom of the screen. But remember, you can watch the recording any time of this. We kind of have a juicy bunch of content to get together today that I'm excited about. Hi Jennifer, great to see you. And I love this topic, and the idea for the topic actually came from reading The Artist Way by Julia Cameron. I've been in a group with a bunch of people in our room or in our community, and that's being led by Andrea Shebelou from A Work of Heart Studio. And there's a section in one of the chapters about being in a creative drought. And it just really struck me that there was definitely a period during this whole COVID shelter in place where I don't know if I was in a drought, but I definitely didn't have my normal flood of ideas and just sort of longing to paint. And when I'm at my most creative, I paint a lot. These are all my paintings behind me. Hi, Megan, great to see you. So I thought I would kind of maybe dig into what this topic means to me and what are some of the ways that I personally get out of a creative drought, and get some feedback from you guys on what are some of the ways that you get out of a creative drought as well. And I think that the collective genius is always really powerful. But before I dive into the content today, I'd love to hear, where are you joining me from today? So I'd love to hear, where in the world are you? We got people calling in from here in Santa Barbara, Tennessee, the UK, East Coast, West Coast. So I'd love to hear, where are you joining me from today? And while you guys are typing that in, I'm going to take just a minute to tell you a little bit about, hi Catherine, welcome, about who I am and kind of why I started the sisterhood in the first place, and you know how it is that creativity became like the central really driving focus of my own life and my own creativity. And hi Kim from Aurora, I see you're here too, and Janet from Pennsylvania, welcome. Bright and sunny in Tennessee today. It's a beautiful, clear, cool morning here in Santa Barbara, California, which is where I am. So I've definitely been a creative my entire life, but it's only been very recently in the last few years that I would sort of maybe dare to call myself an artist. But I was literally standing in the middle of my studio one day, and this was earlier this year, before COVID, before everything happened. I was thinking about my business, and I've been a business owner for 18 years. I owned a publishing company in the Dallas, Texas area. I had a parenting magazine for 11 years, and I've been a business and creativity coach for the last 8 years. And I was thinking about, where am I going with this? And I have felt the last couple of years like big shifts were coming, and I was floundering, and I didn't know quite what direction to take. And when I don't have clarity, I get really stuck, right? And I tend to just kind of want to hide and go within. And I was just standing there in my studio, and my studio is divided. Half of it is my workspace and half of it is my art and creative space. It's a beautiful room. I love being in there. most of the time. Definitely have learned I need to walk away from that room more often and enjoy rest. That's one of the things we're going to talk about today. But I had this realization as I literally was standing in the space in between my art space and my workspace that I needed to put art at the center of everything that I was doing. And before, my business coaching had really been at the center, and everything else was kind of orbiting around how I saw myself and my identity as a coach. And when I simply made this internal mental shift of art needs to be at the center of everything, it just shifted my entire way of being in the world, helped me to really see everything through a new, hi Kate, through a new creative lens. And that shift has had some really positive, dramatic impacts on my creative work, but also not just on my creative work, and hi Laura, I see you too, not just on my creative work, but on my business as well. And kind of everything is really taken off in some really beautiful ways, including my painting practice. Continues to evolve, right? And I continue to discover who I am on the canvas and on the page. It's been a fascinating journey doing the artist way over the last 12 weeks and really coming back to writing. A big part of my identity is as a writer. I've written 2 of my own books. I co-authored a 3rd book. I've published poetry. I wrote a dissertation. I have a PhD from Stanford University in Spanish, and I was a specialist in 19th and 20th century Latin American poetry. So words and art have always been these sort of driving motivations throughout my lifetime. And yet I never put them in the center, right? And so part of the reason why I find it pretty easy to get out of a creative drought is because I made creativity the most important thing in my life. And for so many of us, it's, hi Naomi, welcome from Valencia, California. Great to see you here. So what I've noticed is that when I really put what's most important to me at the center and allow that to be a guiding principle and the direction and the path that I want to go, that everything else is so much easier. Decisions are easier, creative flow is easier, clarity comes easier, and it gives me a level playing ground to stand on, right? It's like standing at the top of the mountain and looking out instead of being on the uphill climb trying to figure out where I'm going and not really having a clear vision of where I'm going. And some of you that have done some of my live workshops before, we do a really fun creative activity where we actually draw a mountain range and we talk about where we are on the journey on our mountain range and what's the top and how close are we to the top. And right now, I don't know that if I'm at the highest peak, but I'm definitely at a top, and that perspective is really valuable. So I want to know, are you here today because you're in a creative drought, or are you here today because you love live trainings and you're curious to hear more, or you've been at some point in a creative drought and you're always looking for ways to get out of it? But I'm curious if you type in the comments, what brought you to the call and the conversation today? What brought you to the call and the conversation today? I'd love to hear from some of you, and I'm trying to adjust there we go, so it's not, get my camera just where I want it. So you get things all set up ahead and then it feels like everything moves. At least there's no kittens in here knocking things over, which sometimes definitely happens. But I'm curious, what causes you to get in a drought, or are you in a drought currently? So tell me a little bit about your own personal experience with being in a creative drought. Not necessarily what gets you out of that, I'll ask you that later. But there's some clear reasons wanting to interact with a fellow mad creative. Janet, I love it. Thank you. Yes, I am a mad creative. I totally own that title, and I feel like I needed like a big mad hatter hat on. And yes, Laura, I know you left a creative drought. Awesome, right? Ways to get out of the drought. Beautiful, beautiful. Thanks, Kim. Struggling with motivation, just getting started, need to get started. Yeah, I love that. Not in a drought, but open to growing and be more productive. If anything, I get clogged by too many ideas. Amy, I'm so glad that you said that, because next week I'll be back on Tuesday afternoon with another live event, and I'm going to do the opposite of the topic, is what to do when you're flooded with creative ideas, and how do you manage all of that creativity and make space for it, right? Bring the rain to clear the air. Amen, sister. I love that. Interested in the future. Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you for whatever the reason that brought you here today. Deep gratitude to everyone for showing up to play with me live. It's nice not to be talking to totally empty space and to have some people on the other line. Rachel in a creative drought. Beautiful. Thank you. Struggling with being motivated right now and love these live events. Thank you, Lisa, for that. Appreciated. So many ideas. Yes, that tends to be my problem normally, is more ideas than I can ever possibly implement. So we'll talk about that next week. But first I want to dive into what are some of the causes of a creative drought. And if you're just joining us, welcome. We're just getting started, and we're going to go for, about an hour or so, maybe a little bit less today. And remember, you can always watch the replay, excuse me, later on in our conversation. And I forgot to bring a drink of water in here with me, so pardon me, I'm going to be clearing my throat a little bit. But I wanted to talk about some of the drought when I don't follow the muse. Hi, Annie, great to see you. Yes, love that. From no ideas to too many ideas, right? And where do you find the balance? So that awesome, Laura. I'm going to remember that for next week and bring that into the conversation for next week's training on being flooded with ideas. And if you see me looking down, it's because I've got my handy dandy little cheat sheet of notes here so that I don't forget anything that I want to share with you guys. But some of the causes of drought from my perspective, and please type in the chat if these resonate with you, or there's others that you think might be causing drought that I didn't mention. Remember, this is a collaborative process, and there's a lot of genius and amazing creativity in the sisterhood in general, and definitely on this call with me here today. But some of the, so glad you're here, Jane. Happy to find you too. Yes, and Annie is, I love these, right? And these are all the things. She could just read my list for me. You totally nailed it. But burnout is one, right? And burnout happens when we're trying to do too much, when we have too much on our plate, and we tend to put others first and put ourselves at the bottom of the list. Stress and anxiety can cause a creative drought because we're spending too much time in our head thinking and worrying and trying to figure out instead of just being in creativity. And I was listening to this beautiful, beautiful Krista Tippett on Being interview with a poet whose name I can't remember right this second on my walk this morning. And one of the things that came to me as I was listening to how she talks about her experience of poetry and writing is that unstoppable creativity is not about doing. It's not about more productivity. It's actually about being. And when we learn to really embody creativity and the way that we look at life through the lens of the artist or through the perspective of the artist, then it shifts how we're being, but it doesn't need to shift what we're doing. Stuck in a habit loop is another thing that can cause a creative drought or put you into a creative rut. And that habit loop could be food, that habit loop could be TV, that habit loop could be social media, too much time on Instagram, which I can certainly be guilty of in the evenings, watching TV and surfing Instagram, or Pinterest. I can get on Pinterest and get lost for hours. So getting in habit loops where we're not prioritizing art making and creativity can cause a drought because we're experiencing a lot of input, but it's not the right kind of input. And I'll talk more about how input can actually fill our creative well. And another cause of creative doubt, one of the biggest ones perhaps, not enough rest. Like not enough taking breaks, not enough good sleep. And as a 55-year-old menopausal woman, sleep is just not perfect. And I'm a good sleeper generally. So lacking sleep is not a favorite thing for me. Sometimes not enough shift in perspective. So one of the things that is something that fuels my own personal creativity is travel. I'm super inspired by seeing new places, visiting other towns and villages and cities and countries. And I haven't traveled since March. We came back from New York City where my daughter played at Carnegie Hall in March. They were the last band to play right when everything shut down for COVID. It was a kind of a a crazy, interesting whirlwind trip to New York City in March, and I've been nowhere, right? Beyond my four walls in my town and maybe a couple of drives. And I realize like what a drought that puts me in, because I'm stimulated by people, by places, by street art, by going to museums and new places. Going to the Met in New York City was like, we went 2 days in a row. It was so inspiring to be there. And so some of my drought came from not having new vistas, not having new perspectives, not having new input. So I've had to be more creative in getting new input, because I walk the same paths in my neighborhood every day. For 8 years, we walked the same neighborhood. We walked the same path on the beach. So even just shifting what part of the beach locally we walk on, or going for a hike in a new place, is a shift in perspective. And so if you've been really constrained in and travel via Google Earth, or so many of the museums are doing virtual tours, or watching some of the beautiful shows like Planet Earth can be very, very inspiring, or watching biographies of some of your favorite artists. Those are all ways to fill the well. But the first thing is to just recognize what's causing the drought. And oftentimes we recognize when we're in the drought, but we don't pause long enough to really look at, why am I here? What got me here? And my guess is that it's usually because we've been pushing too hard, and we've been working too hard, and we've not been giving ourselves a break. That's one of the biggest reasons. Creatives need a lot of time to daydream, to reflect. And the way out of a drought, remember, it's not through doing, but it's through being, it's through deep rest, and it's definitely through play, right? But I'm going to talk very specifically about 3 specific keys that I use on a regular basis to move me through a creative drought. But before I do that, I want to talk for a minute about when a creative drought is a good thing. Because sometimes a creative drought is a messenger, a sort of a warning signal, or just a reminder that it's time to take a break, right? Creative drought could mean not that you're not being productive, but that actually you're in a time of incubation, or as women, a time maybe of gestation of a new project, right? Like I've been thinking about writing a book for the last 6 months. Actually, this is August, right? So the last 7 months, and I've done nothing about actually writing the book, but I can feel it incubating inside of me. And I'm just starting August and September. I'm committed to writing a new book. I signed up with a book writing coach to help me do that, but it could be a time of incubation. It could be a reminder that you need deep rest. And what I mean by deep rest or deep recovery is absence from social media, absence from doing, absence from television, absence from input, and going within to silence. It might be sitting on the beach, sitting in nature, going to the mountains, or finding some water, which could be a pond or a lake, depending on where you live, right? But deep rest. A creative drought may be a calling for deeper exploration of what's meaningful and what matters to you, right? A deep exploration of who are you as an artist and a creative, and what's the next direction you can see yourself going. It could be an unconscious sifting and sorting of ideas, beliefs, values, principles. There is so much going on right now everywhere, between COVID, between the anti-racism movement, between things changing every day. For those of us who are parents, everything feels very up in the air. For those of us who work in jobs and are maybe working from home for the first time ever, there's just uncertainty and there's no end in sight. And so there's this sort of amorphous, amount of information, energy, beliefs, grief, stress, anxiety that's sort of floating and cycling all around us. And some of us are maybe see it over there and are very grounded and centered. Some of us are more empathic and feel more impacted by what's happening out there. Some of us may be personally deeply impacted through loss of job right now, through loss of life. Every day I'm seeing someone that I know in my Facebook feed who's losing someone that they know to COVID. I haven't lost anyone personally yet, but it is happening, right? And so there's a lot happening that can get us really stuck in our heads and away from our creative practice. And I think creative practice for me is the thing that saves my life more often than not, that brings me back to center, that grounds me and supports me every time. So remember, if you feel like you've been pushing to try to be creative, then you're doing the wrong thing. And what you probably need most is a pause, a rest, and the opportunity to refill your creative well. So I'm curious, how are you guys feeling right now? Or when it comes to creative drought, are you feeling like you need rest? Are you feeling hopeful about what's possible? Are you feeling some of this anxiety and stress that's out there when you think about how you're personally being impacted in your creativity and everything out there? What's going on for you guys right now? I'd love to hear from some of you, and what are you doing to support yourselves through this, right? Sometimes creative drought is just a story that we're telling ourselves because we're coming up with resistance and about moving in the direction that we know we're supposed to be moving in. We're feeling deeply called to get our creativity out into the world in new ways, whether that's books, whether that's art or music or meals or gardens or food, whatever that pathway is for you. When we're being called to put our work out there, a creative drought can happen as a way of us unconsciously putting up resistance and going, I'm scared, I'm not really quite ready to go that direction. So let me just put the brakes on over here a little minute and go create some busy work, right? So when we're in a creative drought, we tend to create a lot of busy work for ourselves. Rest, anxiety, and stress. Thank you, Catherine, right? That we all need more rest. Spending a lot of time journaling and being with the land. Me too. I've written and written and written and walked and walked and walked. I was sharing with someone the other day, I feel like I have walked more in the last few months than I have, in the last couple of years put together. Swimming and hiking is so good. The physical fitness is such a great way to get through a creative drought, to get our bodies moving, whether that's go for a walk, go for a run, do yoga. A lot of anxiety, not feeling well, right? Trying to get outside and walk in nature. So for me, I love walking with my iPhone and taking pictures, because taking pictures makes me pause and slow down and really look and see what's around me. One of the things I love living about California, I'm sure I've said this before, is that something is always blooming here. Something is always blooming here. And I love pausing to take photos. Today I picked up a book on and by an adventurer and explorer from someone's little library that looked interesting and inspiring, right? So just really giving yourself a little space and time to take a deep breath, to figure out what's going on. Yeah, and so, Annie, I can't see your whole message there, but that was how I was too. It's like, looking that little bit of drought and then accepting that we're home, right? Accepting that we're home. And so how does that shift everything? Accepting that we're home. So I actually have travel coming up in the next 2 months, and travel actually feels a little daunting right now, right? To be going anywhere. But I have a trip to Colorado. I leave Saturday to move my son into his first apartment. He's about to go into his senior year in the art department at Colorado State University. And then in September, I will be moving my daughter to Oregon to attend her freshman year at the University of Oregon. So we have these 2 big road trips and really big rites of passage for my kids in the middle of everything that's going on, right? So all of this impacts who we are and how we're being in the world right now. So how do we get through all of this? How do we get through all of this? So I'm going to share 3 of my keys. And as I'm looking at this, we're doing good on time. My goal is to have us finished definitely in under an hour today. And if you're just joining us so far, we talked about some of the things that might cause a creative drought. We also talked about some of the things that, some of the reasons why a drought might be a messenger that it's time to take a rest, and it might actually be a good thing. Sometimes that creative drought is an opportunity to pause, to reflect, and really dig into what we want to create. So what do you do when you're in the middle of this creative drought? Well, there's so many different things that you can do, right? Yes, acceptance of things is fundamental. And I think getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and with getting comfortable with uncertainty has been something that is also really important. And I know for me, personally, I realize that I'm pretty comfortable with risk most of the time, right? And yet things feel different, right? They feel different. And I agree, Ani, not fighting the drought, but just accepting that you're in the drought. So if you notice all of a sudden that you're in a drought and yet you're longing to get back to your creative practice, usually that's a sign that you're actually on the way out of the drought. So pay attention to the signs, right? Pay attention to the signs, right? Sometimes it's hard to notice actually that we're in a drought, but key number one to getting out of drought is compassion. Key number one is compassion. And what I mean by compassion is having compassion, especially for your inner artist, right? I believe that our inner artist needs our tender, loving care, and that we need to be in dialogue with that aspect of ourselves, because the artist, the creative, is an aspect of ourselves. For some of us, it's maybe the dominant aspect. For others of us, maybe it's an aspect aligned with all the other roles and parts of self that you play. So step number one is compassion, right? And one of the best ways to have compassion for yourself is to have a dialogue with your inner artist. And one of my favorite tools for having an inner dialogue with different aspects of yourself, it's called the head, heart, and gut technique. And a few of you may have seen me teach this live before, and I think it's really pertinent in our conversation today. So if you have a piece of paper in front of you, I'm going to talk you through the head, heart, and gut activity. And welcome if you're just joining us. We're just getting started talking about our 3 keys for getting through a drought. And I'll do a quick sum up of everything at the end as well. But key number one is compassion. And one of the best ways to have compassion for your inner artist is to have a dialogue with your inner artist and to find out what it is that your inner artist actually wants and needs from you. So grab a piece of paper and a pen or a marker, whatever you have in front of you, and just kind of draw a quick, cheesy outline. This is not about making art, of a person's torso. So imagining from where their stomach is, kind of to the top of their head. You're just going to draw a quick outline. You don't need to have arms, neck, eyes, ears, nothing. We're just doing kind of a broad outline. And if that feels daunting, just draw 3 circles that represent your head, your heart, and your gut. Just draw 3 circles that are going to represent your head, your heart, and your gut. And once you've done that, I'm just going to invite you to take a deep breath for a moment. Just settle. I've been talking a lot, talking fast and furiously. And just settle for a moment. Have your pen ready. And I want you to imagine connecting with your inner artist. First of all, through your gut. And so you might even close your eyes, take a couple of deep breaths, and just imagine as if you're riding in an elevator. Imagine yourself just sort of sitting inside your own body, and visualize yourself just traveling down the elevator, traveling from your head through your heart and just settling into your gut space. And in your mind's eye, you might look around and just notice, what are you seeing? What are you seeing there? Is it dark? Is it light? Is there color or nature? Just take a moment to notice what's going on. And then I want you to imagine that aspect of yourself that represents your inner artist stepping forward and meeting you in this space. You might be sitting down side by side. You might be standing facing each other, sitting on a beautiful park bench somewhere. But just imagine that you're connecting in this gut space with the aspect of you as an inner artist. And just ask the inner artist, what do you need from me right now? What do you need from me right now? And then on your paper, in the space of the gut, just take a couple of notes. We're going to go through this pretty quickly. You can always return to this space and this activity at any time. But just notice from the energy of this gut space, what is it that your inner artist needs most from you right now? And as you feel complete in the space of the gut, you're going to step back into that inner elevator. You're going to rise up and step into the space of your heart. Sometimes it can help to put your hand over your heart to feel really connected to that space and that aspect of self. And just imagine, again, looking around. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? Don't forget to breathe. And in that heart space again, ask your inner artist, what do you need from me? What do you need from me? And allow your inner artist in that loving heart space to answer the question, showing what they need, what love and support they need right now. Just taking a moment to jot that down on your paper. And then taking another deep breath, stepping back into that inner elevator, rising back upwards until you're seated in your head, the center of your forehead, your third eye, your pineal gland. There's a lot that's happening, but imagine that you're sitting right in the center of your head, taking a look around, looking, feeling, hearing, smelling, using all of your senses to get a sense of the space. And again, inviting the voice of your inner artist and asking the inner artist in the space of the head, what do you need from me? What do you need from me? And as you hear those answers, pausing to write that on your page. Just giving you a few seconds here to complete that exercise. If you're just joining us, we're just doing some dialogue with our inner artist through our gut, our heart, and our head. Just connecting here to see what love, what support, what security, what reminders does our inner artist have for us to help support us through this drought. And as you come back fully into the space of the room, wherever you're sitting, just reflect back over your notes and what you wrote, and just notice, is there congruence between your head, your heart, and your gut? Or does each aspect of self really need something different from you? Is there a new picture or perspective that your inner artist is offering you that's your way forward out of the creative drought? I can give you tools, techniques, tips, tactics all day long to get out of a creative drought. But in your heart, in your gut, and in your head, you know the pathway forward. And it's important to pause, to listen, to trust, to create space to have this dialogue with that aspect of yourself that knows exactly what it is that you need. And compassion always begins with loving ourselves, loving all the aspects of ourselves. Compassion begins with being kind to ourselves, with not beating ourselves up for what we're not getting done, but for celebrating what we are creating, for celebrating giving ourselves permission to rest, to be in deep self-care. Thank you, Ani. It's one of my favorite coaching tools and practices that I use with my clients. So just noticing, where's the shift coming? Where is the shift needed, right? And I'd love to hear your experience. What was an aha, insight, or learning that you had from doing this head, heart, gut technique? What was an insight, learning, or aha that you had from doing this? You know, is there a clear path forward? Is there just a lot more questions? And what you really need is more time for deep reflection. So asking yourself and giving yourself permission to be in the time of exploration and inquiry. And when you see it as a time of exploration, inquiry, or incubation, then it's not a drought. It's a pause. It's an opportunity for deep rest and recovery. So that's key number one, is having compassion for yourself and for your inner artist. And I'd love to hear in the chat some of your key learnings, insights, for those of you that participated. You need the sound of water. Beautiful, Mary Rose. I love that. Need the sound of water. And this is a tool you can use over and over and over again for when you're feeling stuck. Each space was different than the other visually. That was fun. Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. Mine are too. Every time I do this, they're the same each time, which is interesting, especially my gut space, but they're definitely very, very distinct from each other. So the next one is one of my favorites, keys, and I talk about this one in a lot of my trainings, but for me, this is one of the most powerful ways to get out of a creative drought. And it's to get curious. I think curiosity is one of the most overlooked values, traits, characteristics, and truly creative, innovative people are incredibly curious, right? Incredibly curious about everything. And they're especially curious about things outside of their body of work or their area of expertise. And so one of the fastest ways to get out of a creative drought is to get really curious. And getting curious helps us get out of our head. And so some different ways to practice curiosity are one, and we're going to do one right now. So we're going to do a fun, curious activity that's going to get you out of your head, not give you time to think, and just remind you about how easy it is to see things through the creative lens. So when I talk about curiosity, curiosity is about asking questions. It's about looking through at a different angle at the things in your life. It's about finding creative input from experts, things that pique your interest outside of your field and scope of work. But mostly curiosity for me is about looking, seeing, and listening. So we're going to practice that right now. So what I want you to do is just look around the space that you're sitting, and I want you to just pick an object. So I did this morning. We're going to take about 60 seconds to do this, and just pick an object. And I picked my favorite coffee mug, which is always close at hand. It doesn't always have coffee in it, but I have this beautiful deep fire engine red coffee mug. That's my coffee mug. No one else is allowed to use that coffee mug. And I did this with my coffee mug. So I want you to just look around you, pick an object, and I want you to do one of two things. Either I want you to take 60 seconds to draw that object, right? Just sketch it out real quickly, or take 60 seconds to write a written description of that object with as many adjectives, adverbs, descriptive language. Like for me, my mug was fire engine red. It fit in the palm of my hand. Like I love that all my fingers fit into the handle without squeezing. I love the color of the red. I love how tall it is. It holds a lot of coffee. It's a big mug, right? So, but there's something about the color of the red that is heart-centered, passionate, pulls me in, reminds me of my own creativity. So get curious, grab an item right now, anywhere around you, and either draw it for 60 seconds or write about it for 60 seconds. And then I'll have you share in the chat as you're finishing up, what is it that you chose to write about or draw about? And it doesn't matter whether you drew or wrote, and feel free to share a picture of what you wrote or what you drew in the comments as well. But sometimes the fastest way to get out of our head is just to force ourselves to get into a different thinking mode, right? A different thinking mode. And that different thinking mode, so if you normally draw, maybe you should write. If you normally write, maybe you should draw. Maybe you should take 50 photos of your favorite thing and see what happens. And if you're drawing, I challenge you to take that sketch a little bit further and look at the actual shapes of the object. Like I noticed when I was drawing my mug, is like it's a cylinder, and there's circles, and there's a rectangle, and there's a long triangle that makes the handle. There's these beautiful round curved edges. So also look at the shapes, like really look at the item, right? So often we're thinking so hard about trying to get it right that we're not seeing what's right in front of us. So practice seeing for just a few seconds, and then come and tell me in the comments what it is that you chose to draw or write about, and feel free to share some pictures, and I'll be able to go back later and look at those pictures. But so curiosity, again, as you guys are drawing, I'll just remind you that curiosity really is all about looking at things closely. It's about getting quiet and listening to what's going on, right? Listening, like a moment of curiosity is like a moment of mindfulness where we just pause and you think about, what am I hearing close to me? And if I really listen, what am I hearing further and further away? Like where we live, like sometimes when the windows are open and the wind blows just right, we can hear the train going by really loudly. And then other times we don't hear it at all. There's always bird song outside. We have lots of amazing birds here. It's been a spring of orioles, these gorgeous Baltimore, I think it's the Baltimore Oriole. They're like these yellow lemon bombs flying around everywhere that have just been this huge delight. And when I go outside, I get curious. Every time I go for a walk, I look, I listen, I pause and reflect and think, what am I seeing that's different today? As many times as I walk the same path over and over again on my morning route, even though I vary that path, there aren't that many paths, right? But I always look for what's new, what's blooming, what's not blooming. This spring, there was this incredible cactus that bloomed very briefly, and we thought it was done. And then a couple of weeks later, it bloomed again, right? So getting curious is about seeing things differently, getting up, moving away from your desk, taking a bath, taking a shower, going outside for a walk, sitting in prayer or meditation, reading something just for fun. So the best way to feed your creative drought is with input, not output, right? But that input should be unrelated to whatever it is that you're working on, right? So like when I'm trying to write my own book, what I will often do is I love to do research, and so research inspires me, but sometimes I need to step away from my book completely, go for a walk, take a shower. I'm not a big napper, but sometimes I nap. I love binging on Netflix shows, so I may need to go watch a couple of Netflix shows. I'm a huge fan of Krista Tippett in On Being, and I listen to her podcast a lot of times for inspiration. So listening to audiobooks and podcasts is another way that I fill my creative well. And I am fed by the interdisciplinary learnings from things that are unrelated to the work that I do, right? So reading books about spirituality and personal development, but also reading things about history that I don't know anything about, right? So looking for inspiration to feed what you're doing, right? That's unrelated to your work. This is a big key to getting through a creative drought, is to seek an inspiration in unexpected places. That's part of getting curious, is looking in unexpected places for inspiration. the truth is that we're never really in a drought, because as human beings, what's totally natural and innate to us is this just flood of ideas all the time. Those ideas are happening. They may be getting buried back there in your unconscious. And I mentioned earlier, next week I'll be doing a Facebook training, I think on Tuesday afternoon. I'll do an event later today about that, but I'll be doing one on what to do to manage your flood of ideas, right? What to do to manage your flood of ideas. And those ideas never stop flowing, but sometimes we stop listening. So I also think that curiosity has everything to do with silence and going within. And for me, journaling is part of my personal practice and how I go deep within to find some of those answers, right? How I go deep within to find some of those answers. And then finally, key number 3, and this is a fun kind of practical one. What else did you guys draw or play with that was right around you? What did you write about or draw? So Kim said she had a light up turtle. I love turtles. I don't know what it is about turtles, but I love turtles. And I just read a beautiful story, speaking about reading things that are different. I'm reading the most beautiful book right now called Deep Creativity. And there's a chapter in the book about one of the authors' experience with a sea turtle that was so moving, right? So moving. So turtles are inspiring. Yes, coffee mugs, always so inspiring. So key number 3, and to finish up, is to play with creative constraints. I love the principle of creative constraints. Some of you have heard me talk about this before. So constraint simply means that we're not allowing ourselves to play with a smorgasbord of materials, right? So the principle of creative constraints from a design perspective has everything to do with really how, and the best example is if you told an architect you gave him a plot of land and had an acre of land and said, go build me a house, he wouldn't know where to start. He needs some constraints, right? So that constraint might be, I want an all green solar powered house with big windows, a beautiful outside kitchen, and a xeriscaped lawn and I want the house to be 3,000 square feet, and I want to have 4 bedrooms and like 15 bathrooms, right? So those kinds of constraints actually make us more creative. So when you're in a drought, you can play with constraints. And here's a couple of very specific ways that you could play with constraints in order to help you get out of that creative drought. First is time. Oftentimes we give ourselves too much time to get things done when we can do better in a short amount of time. Many of us in the sisterhood are certified Zentangle teachers, and one of the things that drew me in the very beginning was the idea that a Zentangle tile, which is a 3.5-inch square, for those of you who aren't familiar, could be completed in about 15 minutes, right? And at the time, gosh, it's probably been over 10 years ago now, when I discovered Zentangle for the first time, what I appreciated as a busy mom and a busy business owner at the time, my life was like pretty crazy, pretty intense. And I'm like, 15 minutes of creativity, I can do that, right? And so that opened me up into all kinds of other amazing things. But a constraint of time. So first constraint is give yourself only 15 minutes. Second constraint, pick 2 or 3, no more than 3 materials to create with. So you might have a magazine, a pair of scissors, and a glue stick, and only allow yourself to play with collage for 15 minutes. Or you might grab 3 colors of paint and a paintbrush and paint for 15 minutes and just make marks on paper. So constraints of time and materials can actually increase creativity. Many of us are supply junkies, we're online course junkies. We have access right now during one of the amazing parts about COVID has been the opportunity to take so many different online courses and events and retreats and all the YouTube videos that people create, right? There's a lot of access to input. And because of that, we get excited to try new things. So I don't know if you guys have seen, I saw Charlotte shared and then Brian Crimmins shared, who are both members of our community, about neurographic art. And I'm like, I can tell I'm already addicted and I haven't even tried it yet. I've just started investigating. It's this really cool process. You can Google it if you don't know what I'm talking about, but it's so easy to get totally invested in a new technique or a new set of supplies, and then be completely overwhelmed when we look around our creative space and there's so many supplies everywhere, right? There's so many supplies everywhere. So the trick here is to actually constrain yourself and to pick just a few supplies, right? And one of the things that I remember Annie Oken talking about, yes, I'm so glad, Amy, it's not just me about the neurographic art. I can see myself getting obsessed. I already make a lot of art like that in my journal, but I love the intentionality and the art therapy side of that personally. But I learned this from Annie, right, of having project boxes. And so creating a couple of simple project boxes with a few supplies, right? So just a very few supplies, and grab a box and with the constraint of only using what's in that box, right? Only grab what's in that box and give yourself 15 minutes to create. This will jumpstart your creativity, I promise. You could do this with writing as well. So one of the ways to jumpstart writing, if you're feeling blocked as a writer, is to use a writing prompt, right? I'm a huge fan of morning pages of the Artist Way process of just doing dump writing every morning, but sometimes even sitting down to write morning pages, like I stare at that blank page and I'm like, I don't know what to write about today. I literally write on the page, I don't know what to write about today. I don't want to be here writing these pages. Why am I still doing this? And I'm 12 or 13 weeks in and I've missed maybe 2 days. Pretty proud of myself for that commitment, which is not always one of my strong suits to those kind of creative habits. And it's been very, very empowering and inspiring. The other aspect of creative constraints that I want to mention is going back to your basics, right? So for me, one of the places that I will go back to when I want to do something creative and I'm not having ideas, I go back to Zentangle personally. So that's a basic for me. Doing a basic, simple tile can be a basic for me. If you're a musician, playing scales is a great way to go back to basics. If you're a writer, write a sonnet, right? The sonnet has very clear structure and clear outline. Take a photo just for fun. If you're a photographer or an artist of any kind, grab your phone, walk around your house and look for interesting corners and spaces and parts of art and things to take photos of, and take photos just for fun. Writing prompts are brilliant for getting you going, and there's millions of resources on Google with access to different writing prompts, right? The Bible could be writing prompts. Your favorite Buddhist text could offer great writing prompts. For me, poetry often offers some of the best writing prompts. I love playing with lines of poetry. So create constraints for yourself. Give yourself permission to actually not go hog wild, right? To really find that point of entry and limit time, limit materials, limit colors, and go back to basics are 4 ways that constraints can really support you in moving through a creative drought. And if you consistently show up to the page every single day for 15 minutes, and if 15 is too long, 5 minutes of creative play, of just putting marks on paper, putting words on paper, trying the neographic art, but the more that you show up to your creative practice, the more fulfilled, right? The more fulfilled you'll be. The more fulfilled you'll be. Yes, constraints is all about the elegance of limits, absolutely. And it's true, right? If you think about some of the best architecture design or some of the best photography, right? There is an elegance of limits and lines and color and other things that's just adds to the overall beauty of the design. So definitely constraints are a thing that can help you move out of drought. We often think that what we need is a flood. We don't need a flood to get us out of a drought. We need some nice, soft, gentle, compassionate, loving, curious rain to help wash away some of the cobwebs, to remind us to rest, and to go back to the beginning, right? To go back to the beginning. So those were some of my favorite ways to get myself out of a creative drought. And before we complete, I just want to let you know about another 2 fun trainings that I have coming up. So next week, I don't have the date in front of me, but I'll get you guys all the information. On Tuesday, I'm going to be doing a training on what do you do with a flood of ideas. So if you're not in a drought and you have the opposite experience, what are you supposed to do in that scenario? And then the week of August 25th to 29th, I'm going to be doing a 5-day training right here in the Facebook group in the Sisterhood called The Unstoppable Creative. It's going to be all about putting creativity at the center of everything and becoming, being, living, and accessing the most creative aspects of yourself. It's all about emerging as a creative, emerging as an artist, and finding your creative courage and the best expression of your creative voice. Again, that's called The Unstoppable Creative, and that'll be happening started August 25th. There'll be lots of information coming. It'll take place live at noon, Tuesday to Friday, and then there'll be a art retreat, a mini art retreat on the Saturday, August 29th. And all of that is free to attend for anybody. So all of those events will be free to attend. More information coming, but I'm super excited about the Unstoppable Creative. It'll be some new content and some things that I feel like is important to say over and over and over again, often because I'm the one that needs to hear them. So just in quick summary, remember to look at the reasons why you're in a creative drought, to pause, just notice, acknowledge that why, yes, I am in a drought, and that's okay. To think about why you're in the drought. Is it a time of incubation? Is it your body and your artistic spirit just longing for more rest and maybe some creative recovery? And then 3 ways to move through a creative drought. First, by having compassion for yourself and your inner artist. Second, by getting really curious about what's right around you, really getting curious by filling your well with other things that inspire, interest, and intrigue you. And third, by playing with constraints of time, materials, and colors. So I so appreciate you guys coming to play with me today. And before we go, I'd love to hear what was your biggest aha, insight, or takeaway from our conversation today. And even if you're watching the replay, I'd love for you to let me know as well what was useful in what I shared with you today. So what was your biggest takeaway from our conversation today? And welcome, Melody. We're just finishing, but the replay will be available in just a few minutes. But what was your biggest takeaway from today? I'd love for you to just type in the chat and share your biggest aha, insight, or takeaway from today. So that feedback helps me know that I'm on the right track or that I totally missed the mark. And, it's hard to sit here and feel like I'm talking to myself all day long. So your feedback means the world to me. And the head, heart, gut activity. Awesome, Rachel. Thank you. Yeah, it's a favorite. One that I love to play with over and over and over again. It's a great one to do in your journal every day, 15 minutes with limited supplies, right? Head, heart, gut. Yeah, beautiful. Head, heart, gut. Awesome. Yeah, thank you, everybody. I love that was meaningful you. It's a great practice, and it's a great thing to do in your journal on every single day and help you get in touch with different aspects of yourself, especially if you're trying to make a decision. It's a really powerful way to understand why you're struggling to make a decision. It can help you actually get into alignment, right? Yes, constraints are compassionate creative expression of time, materials, and colors. Yeah, beautiful, Naomi. Thank you. Yeah, you don't need a flood to get out of a drought. Yes, thank you. Thank you. I love that. These are great. Thank you guys so much. Actually, Ani, if you just Google neurographic art, I'm still discovering it as well. Or go look at Charlotte Carpentier shared an example, and Brian Crimmins actually shared a link this morning to a YouTube video about it. That going into heart increases the flow of blood to your higher brain centers, right? Which then gets all your creativity going again. Yeah, super, super fun. Thank you, everybody, for joining me live today. I'll be back next week to talk about the flood of ideas, and then again on August 25th with the Unstoppable Creative. I'm Dr. Minette Riordan, and as always, I love gathering and being in community with the sisterhood. So thanks, everybody. Here's to a beautiful creative day. Bye-bye.